Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. A little while ago, I told you about Fearless Fund, which is basically a venture capitalist organization of sorts that gives money to black women business owners as a way to fund their businesses and help to turbocharge their entrepreneurship. I also pointed out that serial litigant Ed Blum, who has made it his mission that he's going to misuse the courts as a means to try to attack black people, he decided to attack Fearless Fund as hopefully opening the gates to attacking anything and everything that has to do with black people and economics in America. This is a far-right agenda that's been playing itself out, and it couldn't happen without the Democrats allowing it to. But for those of you who are not familiar with Ed Blum, I've done recaps of this guy's sordid career on this channel a few times, but the Cliff Notes version is this. Ed Blum tried to become a politician way back in the 1990s, but the district that he was running for office in had a black population that could see this racist pustule from a mile away, and they crushed him at the polls. They also destroyed what little hope he had of ever having a political career. So Ed Blum decided that he would start a new career attacking black people as basically the front man for whatever wealthy white ideologue was willing to give him some money to do so. Ed Blum didn't have any brains, but he does know how to find some people to file a phony grievance for, and that's what he's been doing. That was big back in the 1990s, claiming that everything is politically correct. You hired a black person, that's politically correct. All of that crap. The main thing that needs to be known about Ed Blum is that he manufactures these lawsuits. These are not people who are coming to him saying, I need someone to represent me. What happens is he starts off with something that he thinks his white donors want him to go after. Anything involving black people will do. And then he looks around and auditions people. Hey, can I get you to sign on to this lawsuit? Go back in this channel and see the videos that I made detailing how Ed Blum put together his phony lawsuits against school admission policies. What he did was he asked literally one of his friends, can I get your daughter to apply to this school so that when her application predictably gets declined because she doesn't have the grades and she clearly doesn't have the temperament or personality that any school would want her part of the student body, I'll just turn around and say, well, the reality wasn't her sorry grades and it wasn't her sorry lack of character. It was some black people. It was black people, you see. We have some judges who we already got on the bench. Some of them will go along with it. That's what Ed Blum does. He literally had friends that he was asking, can I get your kid to sign on to this? And the same thing goes for the Fearless Fund, no doubt. Now, for the longest time, creeps like Ed Blum couldn't get any traction with their nuisance suits. The courts saw what they were doing and turned them down. Sure, they would have the occasional seeming feel-good moment, but it wasn't anything that mattered. That changed a little over 10 years ago. What occurred? Well, during the Obama years, Mitch McConnell said that the top priority of Republicans during the Obama administration was to ensure that Obama did not get any judges nominated to the federal bench. Why did that happen? Because the Republican Party had been in bed with an organization called the Federalist Society. Now, the Federalist Society has been around since the 1980s, and the Federalist Society has single-handedly been responsible for virtually all of these far-right judges, all of these lunatics that you see on the federal bench. They are all Federalist Society members by and large. That's what the Federalist Society was created for. People like Clarence Thomas, Antonin Scalia, Sam Alito, the list goes on and on and on. That's what the Federalist Society was created to do. To have a bunch of individuals who took a vow that they would ignore the Constitution and that they would simply hand down judicial rulings based on their own putrid political ideology. That's the Federalist Society. Now, the same people who give money to fund the Federalist Society, there's a huge amount of overlap between those rich white donors and the ones who give money to people like Ed Blum. This is a closed loop of corruption. So that's where Ed Blum came from, and that's the reason why this guy runs around filing lawsuits about anything and everything specifically and exclusively related to black people. That's this guy's entire reason for being. This is what this guy's life's mission is, that he's going to be filing lawsuits in the courts. Now, he got some traction starting about a little over 10 years ago because Mitch McConnell and the Republicans' efforts to front-load the federal judiciary with Federalist Society operatives started to kick into high gear about then. Why? Because this was their plan. They realized that they had lost the culture. They also realized that the legislature wasn't going to be able to go along with their plans. They couldn't use the legislature to ram their agenda down the nation's throats. So front-loading the courts with these far right-wing operatives was seen as their way of doing an end run around the legislatures. As Antonin Scalia himself admitted during the Shelby v. Holder ruling, You couldn't count on the legislatures to do what the Republicans want because the politicians were scared of the voter backlash. So the courts have to overturn all of these voting rights laws because the politicians never will do it. I invite you to actually read Antonin Scalia's opinion that he handed down on the infamous Shelby v. Holder ruling. He said it himself. So that's where Ed Blum comes from. That's the reason why this guy exists. Now, last year, a judge ruled that the Fearless Fund should be allowed to continue giving out their grants because Blum's lawsuit was likely to fail, mainly because these grants are not contracts. That was the lie that Ed Blum was using. His entire lawsuit is based on a fraudulent and not to mention erroneous reimagining of a post-Civil War law, saying that Fearless Fund's grants are actually business contracts. Actually, they're not. A business contract requires something to be exchanged, quid pro quo. If you just give money to someone, that's not a contract. A contract requires the other party to do something for it. You're not receiving anything in exchange of any sort of value. That being the case, it is not a business contract. And that's the reason why last year the judge said that Blum's lawsuit was likely to fail. He claimed it was a contract. It doesn't even meet the legal definition of a contract. But that changed with the recent appeal with the 11th Circuit Court in Miami. Now, they decided that, well, even though the Freedom Fund's grants are not actually business contracts, well, they should be treated as business contracts anyway, even though they don't meet the legal definition of it, and even though this is clearly not a situation of somebody who's going to be hiring anyone or anything else. This is obviously political jockeying that's going on here. They're handing down rulings based on ideology, certainly not based on the law. And by the way, just for the record, the 2 out of the 3 judges who decided to rule in favor of Ed Blum, they were put on the bench by Donald Trump. It was 2 of Donald Trump's appointees who handed down this ruling. I say that because when you have these clowns saying, we need to support Trump, we need to vote for Trump, man, let's vote for Trump. This is what these morons want us to vote for. This is who they want us to cast a ballot for. This is the reason why I tell you, no, we're not voting for Trump. There's nothing to support there. So he couldn't show that his phony plaintiffs were actually ready and able to apply for the grants that they claimed to want. And he couldn't even demonstrate that they had suffered any sort of injury. Now, that's supposed to be the end of the lawsuit right there, but of course it wasn't, because you have these activist judges of the far right acting as a rubber stamp for their extremist ideology. Ordinarily, I would dismiss Ed Blum saying that his nuisance suits are a solution, desperately looking for a problem, but in reality, his legal lie suits, not lawsuits, lie suits, are not even a solution because they're not meant to actually solve anything. This is about nothing more than guaranteeing economic control remains in white hands and to prevent specifically black businesses from having access to the same avenues of advancement and competitiveness as every other non-black group has enjoyed from day one. These non-black businesses get all kinds of commercial and governmental help, and that's why we see everyone able to leapfrog us so quickly, and then these same groups turn right around and claim, I got off a boat with no money, nobody ever tried to help me, I pulled myself up by my bootstraps. They're lying, of course. And the people who tell these stories, they know that they're lying. White supremacy itself is a lie, and it can only perpetuate itself through the use of more lies. The people trying to be white adjacent by claiming that they're white on applications, or who try to palm themselves off as model minorities, they know the rules of racism, and they play right along with it. The Justice Department found blatant, egregious racial discrimination by banks who in 2023 were still practicing redlining, and it wasn't just 1 or 2 banks in 1 or 2 little racist towns. The Justice Department found banks engaged in open redlining from Florida all the way over to California. So it doesn't matter if it's a red state or blue state, they're all doing it, and neither a Democratic state attorney general nor a Republican one were doing anything about it. And you know who else isn't bothered by this blatant racial discrimination? Ed Blum. He's fine with it. He never says a word about it. He's not bothered by it at all. He didn't say, oh my God, there's all this redlining going on. We can't have this racial discrimination. He looked and said, oh, they're discriminating against black people. Good, they're doing my work for me. And his little organization doesn't go after anyone who gives money to non-black groups. For example, one of the largest grant organizations in the U.S. to non-whites is AAPI Strong. They give business grants exclusively to Asian American business owners, only Asian American business owners. Neither Ed Blum nor any of his other racist pals have filed any lawsuits against them. Why? It's because, as we all know, Ed Blum's been using the Asian community as his crash dummies when he pushes his school admissions lawsuits. And he does it under the feeble guise that, well, what I'm doing can't be racist because, hey, I got one or two Asians over here who are willing to get in front of a camera and agree with me. So that's the reason why he doesn't do that, because it goes against his narrative. And on top of that, Asians are not his target. Black people are, because Asians are not a threat to white supremacy. Only black people are. All right. Now there's also another aspect of this that simply has to be talked about. Fearless Fund is basically one step away from being divestors. I gotta say that. In the black community, we don't need to divide ourselves along gender lines, which is exactly what Fearless Fund does. Sure, they claim that they have one or two of their grants that might be given to black men, but the truth of the matter is they do happen to be on this whole pro-feminist kick, okay? They may claim, well, there do happen to be one or two black men who might have gotten some money from us at some point in the distant past. That's sprinkling sugar on crap. That's more of a PR move than anything else, and it doesn't work. And we've seen a number of black women, particularly politically connected black women, or black women who want to be in politically connected circles, who also do their own imitation of this exact same kind of divisiveness. Well, we need something exclusively for only black girls. Well, black girls in particular, black women have needs separate and distinct from black men. Now, they took the exact same arguments that black people have used to try to push for our own group empowerment, and instead they decided, well, let's go ahead and factionalize ourselves. And who's doing the factionalizing? Who's doing the division? It's usually a bunch of self-interested harpies who think that they're going to create a separate power base for themselves alone. And tragically, there's a number of black women who have gone along with the scam. People like the Fearless Fund, what they ultimately want is to escape blackness, which is why they try to separate themselves from the black community on the basis of gender. A huge problem that we have is that whenever these divestors come amongst us, they start talking that talk about, well, black women have issues separate and apart from the black community.
I gotta ask this question. Because you're on this show with the cocktails with the queens. And there's a reason for that. It wasn't to have you defend or not defend Donald Trump. It was about, I care about what's in this contract with Black America for women. And it's not, we're not mentioned at all in the contract with Black America. And
you are mentioned. I mean, when you mention black people, you mentioning black women. So don't count yourself out.
No, that's not true. That's like administration say that when they
black people is not black women.
Black
women are not included in black people.
No, it is. But that's like, that's like you saying. That's like when the president says minorities, then he's including black people. But we all know that that's not the case. Black women have specific needs that are not also being met. And we also feel that there should be some things that are specific to us and our plight as well.
Not part of the black community. Let that sink in. And they said it loud, said it for their chest. We're not part of the black community. Oh no, you're not going to be doing that line with us. They're talking to a black person. Well, Ice Cube, I put an asterisk beside that. But the argument that he's making, they're talking the same way that they would be talking to a white person. What does that tell you? All of this white media propaganda about black men are the white people of black society, all this crap, that's what's caused so many problems for us. And yeah, this interview did take place on Fox Soul, but let's be honest. The problem isn't just limited to that platformer who owns it. If this interview had been on any other outlet or website, the conversation would have gone much the same. Now, keep in mind, these are supposed to be intelligent, educated, worldly black women who are concerned about black people's issues. And yet the only thing that they showed you they were interested in was division. And if you were so masochistic as to actually watch the interview, I don't recommend it. But if you did, you would see they were doing the most to try to stick up for and protect Zaddy and to separate themselves from the black community. The sad truth is, a lot of black people don't want to be black. And we see this especially with the shea butter Twitter crowd, and that's what drives this kind of behavior. For 50 plus years, every time some black woman in the Democratic Party or on the political left has been given a platform to speak in public, you can be guaranteed you can take out your watch and start counting the seconds until she starts talking that black feminist claptrap and starts talking about that black women are exceptional from black men and all the rest of it. They don't uplift the black community, they make it into a straight black feminist line. Now, you never see white women do that, or Hispanic women or Asian women. That's the same reason why whenever you ask a lot of these black women online, how do they identify themselves ethnically, they'll start giving a laundry list of stuff like, I've got some English, and some Scottish, and some Swedish, and some Mediterranean. They'll prioritize and mention everything except for the most readily apparent part of their genetic makeup, being black. And when you see these women screaming that they're not part of the black community, this is the end result of that kind of self-denial. You go from merely prioritizing all of this non-black ancestry to ultimately declaring to the world that you're not black at all. What else does it mean when someone says, I'm not part of the black community? Oh, that means you're not black. Oh, no, I'm black. I'm a black woman. That doesn't make any sense. And tragically, they're not alone. We have to be honest about that. And we also have to be honest about the fact that the Ed Blums of this world, they can see this foolish behavior. Our enemies study us a lot more closely than we'd like to give them credit for. Our enemy is quite sophisticated. A lot of black folks don't like hearing that, but you can't keep a system like this running for 500 years without some keen level of sophistication. You just can't do it without it. They use guile, they use deception, and they also use keen observation. They study their prey. In fact, the white liberal friends of the Ed Blums of this world, and don't kid yourself, men like him always have a lot of white liberal friends, they see this kind of backstabbing, self-hating behavior too, and they also try to capitalize on it. Get your booty to the polls, anyone? Kamala Harris pretending to dance to Cardi B? The whole sorority contingent that she claimed was backing her up, they know exactly what buttons to push. Sure, it may not work, but they at least think that they have some sort of angle on us. This is what paints a target on black women's backs. Going along with this black girls rock, black women are going to leave black men behind crap that some of these black feminists like to spout. That encourages the Ed Blums of this world because he knows that you've isolated yourselves. You can't be a community of one. He knows you don't have anyone backing you up, that you are alone now, and that when he attacks you, you're going to go running back to black men for support. But since you separated yourselves from the black community, what's there for black men to support? Divide and conquer. It's a strategy as old as white supremacy itself. So understand that. Trying to do all of this gender dividing crap, that is not some victimless crime. It's a crime against the community, and ultimately it's a suicide pact. And what we need is for more black women to call this out. The reason that they think that they can do this is precisely because they don't see that there's too much pushback from within black female circles. If that changes, a lot of this off-code behavior is going to stop too. And by the way, I also have to mention, because I would be remiss not to, Ice Cube last year was making a fool of himself with Tucker Carlson, a racist who openly celebrated and defended the murders of black men, but Ice Cube didn't think that that was a problem. And speaking of problems, he didn't seem to think that racism was that big a problem either when he was yucking it up with his buddy Tucker. Go and watch the video that I made about that little putrid interview last year. You can get the highlights there. I've made my thoughts about Ice Cube's two-faced, fork-tongued rhetoric well known. He's not to be trusted. And I'm going on the record with that. Ice Cube is a sellout. The very kind of bootlicking that he used to rail against back in the day, well, he's turned out just like him. Like all these other black celebrities, he's only out for himself. But in an example of a stopped clock being right twice a day in spite of himself, he managed to make more sense than this panel of black women did, and that's a damn shame when you let Tucker Carlson's pet Negro show more intelligence than you. This is something that has to change. When you have some shea butter bootlicks out here pushing division, the main opposition needs to be coming primarily from black women because those are the ones that they're going to be going to for support. And if they find that black women aren't with the BS, that's going to weaken them right out of the gate. But if you remain quiet, you're helping them to do this. Silence equals complicity. This whole divesting thing may be the lunatic fringe, but it's also become institutionalized for certain segments within the black community. Oh, I'm sorry. I mean people who used to be in the black community but clearly don't want to be anymore. These individuals you see doing this stuff, they're preaching economic genocide, and the Ed Blums are carrying it out. I made the groundbreaking video RIP Black America over 15 years ago, and yet you have never heard me talking that men's rights activist crap. Yes, as a black man, we do get targeted more than black women. That's a fact. But that's only because white supremacy understands that even in our current state, black men are still the defenders of our community. Black men still represent the leadership. So we have to be targeted. Being a black male is incidental. The reason that we get targeted more is because we are black, what we represent as black men, not as just men in general. Excluding and systematically blocking black men from opportunities and from influencing policy is meant to prevent the black community as a whole from being able to influence our own lives. So that's the reason why I don't roll with that men's rights crap. My problems in life do not come from the fact that I'm a man. It comes from the fact that I'm black. And if you think that you can maintain this black female exceptionalism claptrap by voting for a Democrat, and that they're going to save you from the Ed Blums of this world, then you're a fool. The Ed Blums know what makes for a soft target, and what doesn't. And when he sees black people trying to divide themselves along lines of gender, he recognizes that there are black people who have done half his job for him. This is why I did my video yesterday about that light-skinned columnist who wrote that gibberish in the Huffington Post. The Fearless Funds and others, they draw from the same well that she does, and they do it for the exact same purpose. This does not absolve Ed Blum of his racism, but to blame Ed Blum for being racist is like blaming a dog for barking. Of course he's a racist. He can't be anything other than that. But the solution to stopping racial oppression isn't to have the oppressed declare that they're not part of the oppressed group anymore. You're not fooling anyone but yourself. So while we can call out Ed Blum's obvious racism, which he would be and has been doing regardless, we can also call out that he's targeting black women, but not because they're women, but because they're black. He doesn't target Asian women or white women or Asian people for that matter, or white people. He chose his target very carefully. The Fearless Fund is hardly the most sympathetic of victims is what I guess I'm trying to say. And while Ed Blum deserves our contempt and scorn, we also have to be realistic about how he chose them in particular. A Fearless Fund that only seems to be afraid of black men and black women being empowered together? There's nothing for me to be proud of in that. Over here, the black community is not part of the shea butter community. We're not looking for a Zaddy or a Becky. We're not looking to hobnob with white spaces. Our goal is not merely to be fearless. The ultimate goal is to put the fear into white supremacy. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. Seven Samion Ham, Nora Brown, Darlette Hall, Wilson Lanier, and G. Mars. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.